The outcasts' struggle. The city of Draxis 5 was a place of bright lights and towering buildings, but for Mara and her son, Leo, it was a place of suffering. The streets were filled with aliens of different shapes and colors, some tall and covered in thick armor, others small and quick like insects. Floating machines carried goods above the crowded markets. The air smelled of strange spices and metal, and voices of different languages echoed through the streets. But no one spoke to Mara. No one even looked at her. She walked through the cold streets, holding Leo's small hand tightly. His fingers were thin, his body too weak. He had not eaten in 2 days. His breathing was soft, and his steps were slow. "Stay close," she whispered. Leo nodded but said nothing. He was only 6 years old, but he understood. The world was cruel to them. Mara pulled her old, torn cloak tighter around her shoulders. It had once been warm, but now it barely protected her from the icy wind. She needed food. She needed shelter, but no one would help a human. She approached a food stall where an alien vendor sold hot, steaming meat wrapped in thick bread. The smell made Leo's stomach growl. Mara swallowed her pride. She had no money, but maybe they would take work. "Please," she said to the vendor, "I can clean, I can lift boxes, I." The vendor, a thick-skinned alien with glowing yellow eyes, snarled. "Human." Mara stepped back as others turned to look. The whispering began. "Why is a human here? They bring bad luck. Stay away from them." The vendor waved a clawed hand. "Get lost. I don't serve cursed creatures." Mara felt Leo tremble beside her. She took his hand and left quickly before things got worse. This was always how it was. They walked for hours. Mara knocked on doors, asking for any work. Some aliens ignored her. Others slammed the doors shut. Some even threw things at her. A soft drizzle began to fall. The rain was cold. The streets became muddy. Leo stumbled. His knees hit the ground. Mara rushed to him. "Are you hurt?" He was shivering. His lips were pale. She lifted him into her arms, though her own strength was failing. She needed to find shelter now. She turned into a dark alley, hoping to escape the rain. Then she felt it. Someone was watching them. She turned her head slightly, trying not to look afraid. In the shadows of the alley, a figure stood completely still. Tall, cloaked. A hood covered its face. Mara's heart pounded. Was this a thief? A bounty hunter? "I have nothing to steal," she said, trying to sound strong. The figure did not move. Leo coughed. Mara held him closer. Then the figure finally spoke. The voice was old and rough. "You are human." Mara narrowed her eyes. "Yes, and that means trouble, doesn't it?" The figure was silent. Then it reached into its cloak. Mara tensed. Was it a weapon? A knife? Instead, the figure pulled out a small metal container and tossed it toward her feet. It landed with a soft clink. Mara hesitated. She slowly picked it up and opened the lid. Food. Real food. Soft bread, pieces of dried meat, and a small, sweet fruit. Leo's fingers twitched toward it, but he stopped himself. Mara looked up at the stranger. "Why?" The figure took a step closer. "Because no one else will." She stared at them. The rain dripped from the edges of their hood, hiding their face in shadows. She had met many cruel beings, but this one was different. Mara and Leo sat in the alley, eating the food carefully. She made sure Leo ate most of it. He needed it more. The figure stood nearby, watching. Mara spoke without looking up. "What's your name?" A long pause. Then the voice said, "Vek." Mara glanced at him. "Why help us, Vek?" Vek did not answer at first. Then he said, "Because I once knew a human." Mara frowned. "There are no humans left here. Not anymore." A cold feeling ran through Mara's spine. What happened to them? Vek's voice was quiet. "The same thing that will happen to you if you stay." Mara's grip on Leo tightened. She felt the warning in his words. Before she could ask more, a loud shouting came from the street. Mara's stomach turned. The voices were angry. The city had noticed them, and they were coming. A stranger steps forward. The night in Draxis 5 was never silent. The city hummed with the sounds of hovering transports, alien chatter, and the mechanical whir of surveillance drones patrolling the streets. But here, in the narrow alley where Mara and her son, Leo, huddled, the only sound was the distant roar of an angry crowd. Mara tightened her grip on Leo, her heart pounding. She could feel it. The hatred, the fear, the rejection, like a cold wind pressing against her skin. They were coming, and she had nowhere left to run. Vec, the mysterious figure who had given them food, still stood nearby. His face remained hidden beneath his heavy hood, his posture calm despite the rising tension. Mara turned to him. "Why are they doing this?" she whispered. Vec didn't answer immediately. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, listening to the echoing shouts bouncing off the steel walls of the city. "Because they fear you," he finally said. Mara let out a bitter laugh. "Fear me? I can barely keep my son alive." Vec's voice was steady. "Fear is not always about strength. Sometimes it is about what you could become." A chill ran down Mara's spine. What did that mean? Before she could ask, a bright blue light flickered at the end of the alley. A floating security drone. And behind it, the crowd. Mara's breath caught. The people of Draxis 5 had gathered in numbers. Aliens of all shapes and sizes, their faces twisted in anger and disgust. Many carried weapons, makeshift clubs, rusted blades, even energy whips. The air smelled of burned fuel and something worse, bloodlust. A tall, armored alien at the front raised his voice. "There they are, the cursed human and her spawn." A wave of murmurs followed. "They should be thrown into the waste pits. They bring bad luck. No ship will land here while they're alive. They must die." Leo whimpered softly, pressing his face into Mara's torn cloak. She stroked his hair, trying to stay calm, but she had never been more afraid. Vec stepped forward. His movement was slow, deliberate, as if he was testing the air around him. The crowd hesitated. They hadn't expected him to side with a human. Mara grabbed his arm. "What are you doing?" she hissed. Vec ignored her. Instead, he raised his voice, not loud, but powerful. "This is madness," he said. "She has done nothing to you." A sharp hiss came from the crowd. A reptilian alien, its skin covered in glowing red scales, spat on the ground. "She is human. That is enough." Another alien, with long silver tendrils instead of hair, sneered. "The last time humans were here, they left destruction. Entire colonies vanished. We do not forget." Mara's stomach twisted. So this was why they hated her. It wasn't just fear, it was history. She opened her mouth, about to argue, but Vec raised a hand. "Perhaps you do not forget," he said, his voice still calm. "But do you remember everything?" The crowd muttered. The leader, the armored alien, glared at Vec. "Step aside, old man. This is not your concern." Vec did not move. Mara watched, heart pounding. Why was he risking himself for them? The armored alien growled, his patience wearing thin. With a swift motion, he pulled a weapon from his belt, a long shock rod crackling with blue energy. He stepped forward. Close. Too close. Leo whimpered again, burying himself deeper into Mara's embrace. Mara clenched her fists. If he attacked, she would fight. She had nothing left to lose. The alien raised the shock rod, and Vec moved like a ghost. 1 second, he was standing still. The next, he had disarmed the alien in a single fluid motion. The shock rod clattered to the ground. The crowd froze. Mara's breath caught. What just happened? Vec's voice was now lower, dangerous. "There will be no violence tonight." The armored alien stumbled back, his eyes wide. He looked from his empty hands to Vec, as if seeing him for the first time. "You?" His voice faltered. He was afraid. The crowd, which had been moments away from attacking, shifted uncomfortably. For the first time, they hesitated. Mara felt the change in the air. Whatever Vec had just done, he had power. But before she could ask more, Vec turned sharply to her. "Come," he said. "Now." Mara hesitated only for a second. Then she grabbed Leo and ran after him. The crowd did not follow. A dangerous offer. Vec led them through the twisting back streets of Draxis 5. The city was still awake, but here, in the underbelly, the world felt different. Dark, forgotten, full of secrets. Finally, after what felt like hours, they stopped in front of a small metal door. Vec pressed his palm against it. With a soft hiss, the door slid open. Mara hesitated. "Where are we?" Vec glanced at her. Somewhere safe. She didn't believe him. But what choice did she have? She stepped inside. The air inside was warmer, filled with the scent of something old and metallic. The room was small, cluttered with old data tablets, strange tools, and maps covered in alien symbols. Mara turned to Vec. "You knew what they were going to do to us," she said. "You knew how to stop them." Vec studied her for a long moment. Then he said, "I told you. I once knew a human." Mara folded her arms. "Who?" Vec's voice was quiet. "A warrior." Mara frowned. "What happened to them?" Vec exhaled. "They were erased." A shiver crawled down Mara's spine. Leo, still weak, curled up beside her and drifted into exhausted sleep. Mara glanced at Vec. "Why are you helping us?" Vec's hood dipped slightly. "Because if I don't, you and your son will share their fate." Mara swallowed hard. She didn't know who Vec really was, but she knew one thing. This was only the beginning. Hunted by the superstitious, the underground hideout was dimly lit, filled with the scent of old metal and dust. Strange tools lay scattered across the metal tables, along with ancient data tablets covered in alien symbols. The air was thick, almost heavy with secrets too dangerous to be spoken aloud. Mara sat on the cold steel floor, her arms wrapped tightly around Leo, who slept fitfully against her chest. His small fingers clung to her cloak even in sleep, his breathing shallow but steady. Across from them, Vec stood motionless. His hood still hid most of his face, but there was something about him, something unnerving. He wasn't just another alien. He knew something, and Mara needed answers. She didn't trust him. Not yet, but he had saved them from the mob. For now, that was enough. She took a deep breath. "You said you knew a human." Vec didn't reply right away. His gloved fingers traced the edge of an old data tablet, lost in thought. Finally, he spoke. "I did." Mara leaned forward. "Who were they?" Vec's voice was quiet. "A warrior." Mara frowned. "A warrior? Humans have never been warriors here. No one even lets us work." Vec exhaled slowly. "That's because the truth has been buried. Long ago, humans were feared. Not because they were violent, but because they wouldn't break." Mara narrowed her eyes. "What do you mean?" Vec finally turned toward her. The light hit his face just enough for Mara to see the deep scars along his jaw, old wounds that spoke of a violent past. "The rulers of this city, the XL Quar, didn't always control Draxis 5, Vec said. Once, this place was wild, chaotic, and then humans arrived." Mara's breath caught. "Humans. Here." Vec nodded. "They were soldiers, survivors. Their ships crashed here, and they had nothing, no supplies, no weapons, but they did something no one expected." Mara felt her pulse quicken. "What?" "They fought back. The Forgotten War." Mara stared at Vec, trying to process his words. "Humans fought, and won." Vec's gaze was steady. "They didn't win. Not completely. but they survived longer than anyone thought possible. They resisted, they adapted, and that's what made them dangerous. Mara's throat tightened. What happened to them? Vec looked away. His fingers curled into a tight fist. They were erased. A chill ran down Mara's spine. Erased. Vec's voice was low. The Excellicore used their power to rewrite history, to make sure no one remembered humans as warriors. They spread the lie that humans were weak, cursed, and unwanted. That's why the people of this city hate you. They fear what you could be. Mara felt her stomach churn. Everything she had been told was a lie. Her people weren't weak. They had once been fighters. And now, the city was making sure that never happened again. Before she could say anything, a distant explosion shook the walls. Leo jolted awake, his eyes wide with fear. Mara jumped to her feet. What was that? Vec turned toward the entrance, his body tense. They found us. The chase begins. The door slammed open with a loud hiss. A group of armored enforcers flooded in, alien soldiers with glowing blue visors and pulse rifles humming with energy. Their leader, a tall Excellicore with shimmering silver skin, stepped forward. There is nowhere left to run, human, he said, his voice cold and mechanical. You will surrender. Mara's breath came fast. They weren't here to arrest her. They were here to erase her. Vec moved before anyone else. In a blur of motion, he grabbed the nearest enforcer's rifle and twisted it out of his hands. With a single strike, he sent the alien crashing to the floor. Run, he shouted. Mara didn't hesitate. She grabbed Leo and bolted toward the back exit, her heart pounding in her chest. Blaster fire lit up the room. Sparks flew as shots hit the metal walls. The air smelled of burned ozone. Vec moved like a shadow, taking down another enforcer with precise, brutal strikes. But they were outnumbered. Mara burst into the back alley, clutching Leo against her chest. The city stretched before her, endless neon lights and towering structures, but nowhere to hide. Heavy boots thundered behind them. More enforcers. Mara's mind raced. She needed a way out. Then, she saw it. A hovering cargo transport was parked near the edge of the street, its engine still running. She turned to Vec. Can you drive that? Vec glanced at the transport. Probably. Mara didn't wait for a better answer. She sprinted toward it, her lungs burning. Behind them, the enforcers shouted orders. Stop them. Vec leaped onto the transport, yanking open the door. Mara threw Leo inside, then climbed in after him. Vec slammed his hand onto the controls. The transport roared to life. The enforcers opened fire. Blaster rounds slammed into the side of the vehicle. Sparks flew. The dashboard flickered. Mara shielded Leo with her body, bracing for the worst. Then, the transport shot forward, lifting into the air. The city blurred beneath them as they soared into the night sky. They had escaped. For now. The warning. The transport sped over the city, weaving between towering buildings. The enforcers weren't far behind. Drones and patrol ships already scanning for them. Mara exhaled sharply, her hands trembling. They were going to kill us. Vec nodded grimly. You were never meant to survive. Mara clenched her fists. Why? Because I might remember the truth. Vec's expression darkened. Because your son might. Mara stiffened. What do you mean? Vec glanced at Leo, who was still curled up beside her, his small hands gripping her sleeve. He's young, Vec said. But I saw it back there. In the way he reacted, in the way he moved. Mara's pulse quickened. What are you saying? Vec's voice was quiet. Your son isn't just human. He's something more. Mara felt her world tilt. What did that mean? And what had Leo inherited from the warriors of the past? As the transport flew toward an unknown future, Mara knew one thing. This fight was far from over. The forbidden archives. The stolen transport weaved through the towering steel spires of Draxis 5. its engines roaring as Vec pushed it to its limits. The neon glow of the city below flickered in waves, the endless sprawl stretching as far as the eye could see. But they were not safe. Behind them, two patrol drones zipped through the air, their engines screeching as they closed in. Their weapons pulsed with blue plasma, locked onto their fleeing target. Inside the cockpit, Mara clutched Leo tightly, shielding him from the shaking vessel. The boy's breathing was quick, his tiny hands gripping her cloak like a lifeline. She turned to Vec, her voice sharp. "Tell me you have a plan." Vec's scarred hands flew over the control panel, adjusting the altitude with terrifying precision. "I have a direction. That's close enough to a plan." A warning siren blared. Mara's heart pounded. They're going to fire. A split second later, the drones released a barrage of energy rounds. Vec yanked the control stick, and the transport dove downward. The plasma shots sliced through the air, missing them by inches. One bolt struck the side of a skyscraper, exploding in a flash of green fire. Leo cried out, burying his face into Mara's shoulder. Vec cursed under his breath. "Hold on." With a flick of his wrist, he jerked the transport into a steep, death-defying dive, rushing toward the lower levels of the city. Mara's stomach twisted as gravity fought against them. The drones hesitated for a brief second, trying to adjust their aim. And that was their mistake. At the last possible moment, Vec veered sharply into a dark tunnel beneath the city. The transport barely cleared the entrance. The drones, moving too fast to react, slammed into the tunnel walls, exploding in a burst of fire and smoke. The blast rattled the ship, but Vec kept flying. Mara exhaled sharply. That was too close. Vec didn't respond. His hands were steady, his expression unreadable. Mara narrowed her eyes. "Where are we going?" Vec adjusted the ship's trajectory, guiding it deeper into the underground network of Draxus 5, to the place they don't want you to see. Mara's chest tightened. "And what's that?" Vec glanced at her. "The truth. The hidden entrance." The transport slowed as it approached a massive rusted gateway. The ancient metal doors were covered in strange symbols, some of them long faded, others scratched away as if someone had tried to erase them. Mara felt a chill run down her spine. "What is this place?" Vec landed the ship and turned off the engines. The silence was almost deafening. "This," he said, stepping out of the cockpit, "is the Forbidden Archives." Mara hesitated. She had heard whispers of this place before. It was said to hold knowledge that was never meant to be found. Records of history that had been wiped from the databases of the city. A place where truths were buried. Leo, still groggy, peeked up at her. "Mama, I don't like this place." Mara kissed his forehead. "Neither do I." Vec approached the entrance, placing his palm on the metal. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, a deep rumbling. The doors groaned open. A gust of stale, cold air rushed out, carrying the scent of dust and forgotten time. Mara stepped forward hesitantly. The corridor beyond was lined with massive stone tablets, old books, and ancient data terminals blinking with weak, flickering lights. Everything felt wrong. Leo pressed himself against her leg. "Mama, I don't want to go in." Mara ran her fingers through his hair. "I know, sweetheart." She looked at Vec. "Whatever's in here, it better be worth it." Vec didn't answer. He simply stepped inside. And they followed. The forgotten truth. The deeper they went, the heavier the air felt. Mara's fingers brushed against an old, cracked stone tablet. The symbols carved into it were almost familiar. Vec stopped at a console covered in thick layers of dust. He wiped it clean, revealing a hidden interface beneath. With a flick of his wrist, he activated it. A soft hum filled the chamber as a hologram flickered to life. Mara's breath caught. It was a human. Not a weak, starving outcast like her, but a warrior. The hologram showed a soldier in battle-worn armor, standing tall among other fighters. Their eyes were fierce, unyielding. There were more of them, an entire unit. Mara's fingers curled into a fist. We were fighters. Vec nodded. The best this galaxy had ever seen. Mara shook her head, barely able to process it. Then why don't we exist anymore? Why is everyone telling us we're weak? Vec's expression darkened. Because they were afraid. He tapped a button on the console. The hologram shifted, revealing a different scene. A council of cell core rulers, their silver skin gleaming under the lights. One of them spoke in a voice that echoed through the chamber. Humans are a threat. If they remain, they will rise again. They must be erased. Their history must be buried. Their children must never know their power. Mara felt sick. Leo clutched her cloak. Mama, does that mean us? She swallowed hard. Yes, baby. Vec turned to her. Now you understand. Mara's hands shook with rage. Her entire life. A lie. Her people. Erased. And now, they wanted to do the same to her and Leo. A deep, furious fire lit inside her. No more running. No more hiding. She looked at Vec, her voice like steel. What do we do now? Before Vec could answer, a sudden alarm blared through the chamber. Red lights flashed violently. Mara spun toward the entrance. Heavy footsteps. The enforcers had found them. Leo gasped. Mama. Vec's voice was grim. They don't want you to leave this place alive. Mara took a deep breath, steadying herself. She wasn't just fighting for her survival anymore. She was fighting for the truth. And she would not go down without a fight. Betrayal and truth. The forbidden archives trembled as the alarm's shrill wail echoed through the ancient chamber. The flickering red lights cast long shadows against the towering shelves of forgotten history, turning the carved stone walls into a maze of shifting darkness. Mara's breath came fast. She tightened her grip around Leo, who clung to her side, his small hands trembling. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, and closing in fast. Vec's scared face remained impassive, but his hands curled into fists. He knew what this meant. They sent a kill squad, he muttered. Not guards. Not enforcers. Executioners. Mara's chest tightened. Then we don't have much time. Vec pressed a button on the old console, wiping the holographic records from sight. We need to leave. Now. But before they could move, a metallic voice boomed from the entrance. Nobody leaves. Mara's pulse spiked. A dozen enforcers stepped through the entrance, their plasma rifles raised. Their sleek armor bore the insignia of the Cell Core ruling class. These weren't common enforcers. They were elites, and standing at the front was someone Mara recognized. Her breath caught. It was Gareth, a human. One of the few who had managed to survive in Draxis 5 by working with the enforcers. Mara had known him from the slums. A traitor, a scavenger, someone who never helped anyone but himself. Now, he stood in front of the Cell Core squad, his rifle pointed straight at her. Mara's jaw clenched. You? Gareth smirked. You really should have stayed in the shadows, Mara. You and your little brat. Leo flinched at the words, burying his face into Mara's torn cloak. Vec stepped forward. Betraying your own kind, Gareth. Even for you, that's low. Gareth shrugged. Survival comes first. I've got a deal. Hand you over. And I walk free with enough credits to get off this rock. Mara's fingers curled into fists. He had sold them out. The enforcers moved closer, their plasma rifles humming with energy. On your knees, their leader commanded. Mara's mind raced. She couldn't let it end here. Her son, the last hope for their kind, was watching. And she would not let him grow up in a world where humans had no fight left. She made a choice. With a sharp breath, she lunged. The fight for survival. Mara's body moved on pure instinct. She grabbed the nearest enforcer's rifle before he could react, twisting his arm at an unnatural angle. The weapon fired into the ceiling, sending sparks and chunks of debris raining down. The room exploded into chaos. Vec moved like a ghost. 1 second, he was beside her. The next, he was ripping through the enforcers with brutal efficiency. He grabbed an attacker by the helmet and slammed him into the stone wall. Another enforcer aimed. Vec caught his wrist, twisted, and shattered bone. Gareth cursed. "Kill them." Shots rang out. Mara dove behind an ancient pillar, shielding Leo with her body. Plasma rounds burned through the air, shattering the stone around them. Leo screamed, pressing his hands to his ears. Mara's breath came ragged. She had to get him out of here. Then, something happened. The air around Leo shifted. Mara's skin prickled with static electricity. Vec, mid-strike, froze for a fraction of a second. His eyes locked on Leo. Then, the entire chamber shook. A burst of energy erupted from Leo's small body, sending shockwaves through the room. The enforcers were thrown backward. Stone tablets shattered. Holographic screens flickered wildly. For a brief second, everything was silent. Leo collapsed, gasping. Mara caught him before he hit the ground. Her mind raced. What had just happened? Vec's voice was deadly quiet. It started. Mara looked up at him, panic rising in her chest. "What do you mean?" Vec's eyes darkened. "Your son isn't just human, Mara. He carries something ancient. Something the Excelcor feared enough to erase." A horrible realization dawned on her. "They were never trying to wipe out all humans," she whispered. "They were trying to wipe out humans like him." Vec gave a slow nod. "And now, they know he exists." Mara's grip on Leo tightened. She wouldn't let them take her son. Never. The escape and the final betrayal. Gareth staggered to his feet, coughing. The blast had knocked him against the stone wall, but he was still standing. His expression was no longer cocky. It was terrified. He stared at Leo. What the hell was that? Mara stepped forward. Cold rage burned in her eyes. "You just sold out the last chance humans have to fight back," she said, her voice quiet but deadly. "And for what? Credits." Gareth swallowed hard. He looked at the enforcers. Half of them were dead or unconscious. The others were struggling to recover. He realized his deal was gone. "No," he muttered, taking a step back. "No, I didn't sign up for this." Vec didn't even hesitate. With a single fluid motion, he grabbed Gareth's own rifle and shot him. Gareth gasped, clutching his chest. His legs gave out. He hit the ground, dead. Mara barely spared him a glance. He had made his choice. Vec turned to her. "We need to move." Mara scooped up Leo, his small body still weak from the energy burst. Together, they ran. As they disappeared into the underground tunnels, Mara whispered into Leo's ear, "I promise you, baby, they will never take you from me." Leo stirred, his voice barely a whisper. "They're scared of me." Mara pressed a kiss to his forehead. "They should be." The cursed power awakens. The tunnels beneath Draxis 5 were ancient, carved long before the towering spires of the city above were even conceived. The air was damp, thick with the scent of rust and forgotten history. The only sounds were the distant hum of power lines and the hurried footsteps of Mara, Vec, and the barely conscious Leo. Mara clutched her son tightly against her chest, her heartbeat wild. She could still feel the shock of what had happened in the Forbidden Archives. The pulse of raw, uncontrolled energy that had erupted from Leo, the force that had sent enforcers flying, that had torn through stone walls as if they were paper. Her son, her fragile, innocent child, was something more. Vec walked beside her, his steps silent, his hood pulled low. He had been quiet since the escape, but his mind was working, calculating. He knew something she didn't. Mara shot him a sharp look. "Tell me," she demanded. "Tell me what's happening to my son." Vec exhaled slowly, his eyes flicking toward Leo, who stirred weakly in Mara's arms. "You saw it yourself, Mara. He is waking up." Mara's jaw tightened. That doesn't mean anything to me." Vec stopped walking. He turned to face her fully, and in the dim tunnel light, Mara finally saw it. Real hesitation in his eyes. "He's not just human," Vec said finally. "He's what the Excelcor feared the most. A remnant." The word sent a chill through Mara's spine. "A remnant of what?" she whispered. Vec's voice was low, grave. "The war. The old humans. The ones who fought back." He gestured toward Leo, whose small fingers twitched in his sleep. The reason they were wiped out wasn't just because they were strong. It was because some of them were beyond strong. Mara's stomach twisted. "You're saying my son is one of them?" Vec nodded. "Not just one of them. The last of them." The air in the tunnel felt colder. He wasn't just talking about human warriors. He was talking about something else. Something far worse. The hunt begins. Before Mara could process the weight of Vec's words, a loud explosion shook the tunnel. The walls trembled. Dust and debris rained down from above. Vec snapped to attention. "They found us." Mara spun, her instincts screaming. From the far end of the tunnel, a sharp blue light pierced through the darkness. Not just one light. Dozens. The Excelcor's elite forces had arrived. Figures in sleek, black armor moved like shadows, their weapons already drawn. Their visors glowed eerily in the dim light. They had come prepared, not with regular plasma rifles, but containment gear. They weren't here to kill. They were here to take Leo. Mara felt a deep, primal rage swell inside her. She wouldn't let them. Vec reached for his belt, his fingers grazing over a hidden blade. "Run," he muttered. Mara shook her head. She wasn't running anymore. She gently lowered Leo to the ground, making sure he was safe against the tunnel wall. Then she rose to her feet, turning to face the soldiers. She exhaled, steadying herself. Something inside her stirred. She had been beaten, rejected, thrown away like trash. She had spent years starving, begging, hiding. She had been called weak. But she wasn't weak. Not anymore. Mara, the warrior. The first soldier lunged. Mara moved without thinking. She sidestepped with inhuman speed, grabbing his wrist and twisting it until she heard a sickening snap. The rifle clattered to the ground. The next attacker was faster. He swung a baton, charged with electric energy, aimed straight for her ribs. Mara ducked. With brutal efficiency, she slammed her elbow into his throat, crushing his windpipe. 2 down. Another tried to grab her from behind. She spun, snatching his own dagger from his belt and driving it straight through his armor. The soldier gasped. His glowing visor flickered. Then he dropped. Vec, who had already taken down 2 soldiers himself, glanced at her with something close to surprise. "You remember," he murmured. Mara's breath was heavy. Her body moved on instinct, as if it had always known how to fight. As if she wasn't just surviving, she was awakening. She turned to the last few soldiers. "Come get me." They hesitated. They had expected a scared, weak human. Instead, they had found something else. Something that Excelcor had tried to erase. A warrior. Leo's power unleashed. One of the soldiers recovered quickly. He raised a heavy containment weapon, glowing with pulsating energy. He aimed directly at Leo. Mara's stomach plummeted. No. The soldier fired. But before the blast could hit, the tunnel erupted with blinding white energy. A shockwave tore through the air. The soldiers were thrown back, slamming into the tunnel walls like ragdolls. Vec barely managed to keep his footing. Mara shielded her eyes. And at the center of it all, Leo stood. His eyes glowed with a pale golden light. His small hands trembled, still crackling with power. The very air around him seemed to ripple, like the fabric of reality itself had bent to his will. Mara stared in shock. Vec exhaled sharply. It's happening. The remaining soldiers, the ones still conscious, looked at the boy in horror. One of them whispered, "He's like the old ones." Another voice, full of dread. He's worse. Leo blinked. The glow faded. His tiny body swayed. Mara rushed forward, catching him before he collapsed. His breathing was weak, his face pale. The power had drained him. She hugged him tightly, pressing her forehead against his. "I've got you, baby. I've got you." Vec knelt beside them, his voice low. "The Excelquar won't stop now. They'll come with everything they have." Mara lifted her gaze, her expression cold and fierce. "Let them." Vec studied her, a slow smirk forming on his lips. "You really are one of them," he muttered. Mara didn't answer. She already knew. The last stand, and the rising hope. The underground tunnels of Draxis 5 pulsed with dying energy. The air was thick with the aftermath of Leo's awakening. The walls were scorched, debris littered the ground, and the scent of burnt circuitry clung to the damp stone. Mara knelt beside her son, her heart racing. Leo's small body trembled in her arms, his breaths shallow. The last surge of power had drained him, left him vulnerable. She stroked his hair, whispering, "I've got you, baby. Just hold on." Vec stood over them, scanning the tunnel's exit. His expression was unreadable. They won't stop now. They know what he is. Mara looked up, her eyes sharp with determination. "Then let them come." Vec exhaled, shaking his head. "You don't understand. They won't just send soldiers. They'll send the purge." A chill crept up Mara's spine. She had heard whispers of it before. The purge was not an army. It was a force of destruction, used only when the Excelquar feared something too much to control. "They'll level this entire district," Vec continued. "They will burn the tunnels, collapse the city above, and wipe every trace of you and your son from existence." Mara clenched her fists. "Then we don't wait for them to come." Vec frowned. "What are you suggesting?" Mara gently laid Leo down and stood. "We take the fight to them. The plan of the impossible." Vec led them through the maze of tunnels, moving with silent urgency. Mara carried Leo on her back, her muscles screaming in protest, but she refused to slow down. She was no longer running out of fear. She was running toward war. Finally, they reached a hidden chamber. The room was ancient, lined with rusted terminals and war-scarred relics. At the center, covered in dust, was a sleek, battle-worn ship. Vec walked up to it, running a hand along its hull. This belonged to the first human resistance. Mara's breath caught. "It still works." Vec smirked. "Barely." He began flipping switches, and the ship groaned to life. Dust fell from the ceiling as old engines rumbled, awakening after decades of silence. Mara looked down at Leo, who stirred weakly. "We're going to finish what they started." Leo's golden eyes fluttered open. "Mama, I'm scared." Mara kissed his forehead. "I know, baby." She cupped his small face. "But you're stronger than you know." Vec strapped himself into the cockpit. "Once we take off, they'll know where we are." Mara nodded. She wanted them to. The time for hiding was over. Breaking through the sky, the ship tore through the underground tunnels, blasting toward the city above. The moment they emerged, the entire skyline was lit up with enemy forces. Drones, warships, the full weight of the Excelquar fleet. The purge had already begun. Massive anti-air cannons swiveled toward them. Defense grids locked on. The sky erupted with a storm of fire. Mara strapped Leo into a safety harness. "Stay low." Vec cursed as the ship rolled through incoming fire. "We can't outfly them forever." Mara's mind raced. They needed a distraction, a way to turn the tide. Then she saw it. On the city's highest spire, a control tower. "That's where their command link is," she realized. "If we take it out." Vec's eyes widened. "We can shut down their defenses." Mara grabbed a weapon from the storage rack, a modified plasma rifle with heavy recoil. "I'll get to the tower," she said. Vec's expression hardened. "You won't make it alone." Mara smirked. I'm not alone. She looked at Leo. The boy was watching the battle unfold with wide, fearful eyes. But beneath the fear, there was something else. Something awakening. The fall of the tower. The ship skidded to a stop on the upper platform of the spire. Mara and Leo jumped out, dodging incoming fire. Vec stayed behind, engaging the warships to buy them time. Mara pulled Leo behind cover as enemy soldiers rushed forward. There were too many. Then, Leo stepped out. His hands clenched. His eyes began to glow. The air shifted. A powerful shockwave erupted from the boy, sending the first wave of soldiers hurtling backward. Mara felt the energy wash over her. It wasn't just power. It was the force of generations. The strength of the forgotten human warriors. Leo turned to her, breathing hard. Mama, I can do this. Mara's throat tightened. He was just a child, but he was also so much more. She nodded. Then let's end this. Together, they charged. Blaster fire filled the air. Mara moved like a ghost, her body fueled by instinct, taking down enemies before they could react. Leo's power shielded them, knocking weapons away, turning the battlefield into chaos. They reached the control terminal. Mara ripped open the panel. Leo, I need one last push. The boy raised his hands, and a golden pulse shot forward, shattering the tower's energy core. The moment it exploded, the entire Excel Core defense grid went dark. The enemy ships in the sky faltered. Their warships lost control. And suddenly, the humans weren't alone anymore. Across the city, alien rebels who had long lived under the Excel Core's oppression saw their chance. And they rose. The dawn of a new era. Mara, Leo, and Vec watched as the city erupted into revolution. The Excel Core forces retreated, their empire crumbling. The people of Draxis 5 were no longer afraid. Mara turned to Leo, brushing dust from his cheek. You did it, baby. Leo, exhausted but smiling, whispered, We did it. Vec exhaled, looking at the sky, now free of warships. They'll come back. Mara nodded. She knew that. But when they did, humanity would be ready. They had survived. Now, they would rise. And this time, they wouldn't fall.